My sister and husband's close bond makes me feel like a third wheel. When my mom said she should have married him, I finally snapped. I'm upset at my mom and my sister because of something my mother said, but everyone around me feels I am overreacting. Please be brutally honest in telling me if I am being insecure or if my mom and my husband are wrong in this. Let me give you a bit of backstory. My husband James, 34M, and I, 29F, were neighbors growing up. My sister, Fran, 34F, was in the same grade as my husband growing up. Everyone knew my sister in school because she is very smart and beautiful. James had a huge crush on her, and all of us knew about it. He asked her out for senior prom, and Fran shot him down in front of the whole school. They still remained friends, but he moved to a different state for college, and we did not hear much from him, except see him when he came back for holidays. James and I were never friends growing up since I was in middle school when this happened. In fact, I was much younger than both of them, and they would actively avoid me or involving me in their hangouts and activities. I went to a good college and got my first job in the same city as James. My mom suggested I should contact James since I did not know anyone there. We became friends, and 3 years later, we got married. We both have high-paying jobs and love our life. We moved back to our hometown during COVID as James's mom had health issues, and our jobs allowed us to work remotely. Fran also had a pretty good life. She married when she was 23, and her husband was pretty well off. 2 years ago, Fran discovered that he was cheating on her for almost the entire duration of their marriage with multiple partners, and she decided to break things off. Fran moved back with my mom. Fran had not worked for the entire duration of their marriage and was expecting to gain significant alimony from the divorce. However, due to complications regarding prenup, she barely got anything and is struggling financially. She got a job, but is barely able to afford her own place and continues living with my mom. James and I were very supportive of her during the whole process. Since James and Fran were friends growing up, they both have a special bond. They have their inside jokes and stories, and I sometimes feel like a third wheel when we all meet. However, James keeps his distance and has never given me any reason to believe that he has lingering feelings for her. Fran, on the other hand, constantly visits us, like 2-3 times a week, and ends up staying for dinner and sleeping in our guest room. I don't mind her coming over, but I do not like the fact that she talks more to James than with me. Also, she always comes over when I am not at home, and I often find them sitting next to each other on sofa and watching TV when I get home. It sort of reminds me of my childhood, where I was locked out of our basement when Fran had friends over, and I would feel left out. Fran is also too comfortable around James and walks around the house in just a towel after her shower when James is around, or sleep in her underwear in guest room without locking the door. I have voiced my concerns to her, but she says that we are family, and she does not care. I have also voiced my concerns to James, and he does make efforts now to explain stories and inside jokes if Fran makes them. The main issue happened this weekend. I was hanging out with my mom and Fran last weekend, and Fran was recollecting stories about how James would do her homework and do chores for her growing up. She said, "He was so much in love with me, and I felt guilty taking advantage of him." My mom jokingly said to her that I wish you had the wits to marry James than your loser husband, and you would have not been in this situation. Fran smiled after hearing that and nodded, but I was hurt by the comment. I protested to my mom that James is my husband, and I do not want her to make such comments about him. My mom doubled down and said that she feels like it, because both James and I are high earners, while Fran is struggling. So, it would make sense if Fran was married to James, and I would be fine since I do not need James to support me financially. She kept on saying that it was a hypothetical, and just wants both her daughters to be happy. I did not like those comments and told them to not speak like that about James and my marriage in general. Fran chimed in and told me that I should not take the comments so personally and I am being too sensitive. However, I had a fight with both of them, and I left. When I came home and told James, he also sided with my mom and Fran and told me that her mom just made a harmless joke. I also raised the issue of Fran's behavior around our house, and he told me that this is between me and my sister, and he is not going to tell Fran about what she can or cannot wear in our house. However, I am just feeling really bad since the situation, and despite everyone apologizing to me, things just don't feel right. Am I wrong here in reacting the way I did? Or does everyone else have a point, and I should be more secure about my relationship with James? Update 1. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about everything, and honestly, I still don't know if I'm overreacting or if my feelings are valid, but I feel like I need to process this somehow. It's not just about what my mom said, although that comment really stuck with me. It's about everything that's been piling up. It's the weird dynamic with my sister, the way she and James have this old history and inside jokes that I can't be a part of, and it's how I felt like the third wheel in my own life sometimes. The comment from my mom wasn't just a harmless joke, at least not to me. It felt like a slap in the face. But let me break down why. For starters, the comment itself was so thoughtless. Saying Fran should have married James because she's struggling financially and I would have been fine on my own. How am I supposed to take that as anything other than offensive? It reduces my marriage to some kind of financial arrangement, like I'm with James because I need his money, or worse, that my relationship is somehow less valid because I'm successful on my own. It also completely invalidates all the feelings James and I have for each other. The implication is that Fran should have been the one who won James because she's the one in need, and I don't need him as much because I'm doing okay financially. It just feels so wrong. It hurts because I've always been compared to Fran in some way. Growing up, she was the one who was beautiful and popular. She was the one everyone had a crush on, including James. And even though I was younger and not part of that scene, I knew it. Everyone knew it. My mom always talked about how beautiful and smart Fran was. She was the golden child, and I was always kind of just there. I went to a good college, I worked hard, and I've built a life I'm proud of, but I still feel like I'm living in her shadow sometimes. And now, even in my own marriage, it feels like my mom would rather have seen Fran in my place. But that's not all. It's not just about what my mom said. It's about Fran and how she's been acting lately, especially around James. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but it feels off. I've tried to be supportive of her through her divorce and everything, and I get that she's had a really rough time. I don't want to seem unsympathetic, but there's a line between being there for your sister and feeling like she's stepping into your life in a way that makes you uncomfortable. She's at our house constantly, like she'll come over 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes without even telling me beforehand. And the thing that really bothers me is how she always seems to be there when I'm not home. I'll come back from work, and they'll be sitting on the couch together, laughing, sharing stories from their high school days that I wasn't even around for. I know that logically, James and Fran have known each other much longer than James and I have. They grew up together, went to the same school, and were in the same social circles. I wasn't really part of that, and I never will be. But it feels weird to walk into my own house and feel like the outsider. I know James loves me, and I've never had a reason to believe he has any lingering feelings for Fran. But at the same time, it's hard to shake the feeling that he's more comfortable with her than with me sometimes, especially when she's here so much. Then there's how Fran behaves when she's around James. I've talked to her about how uncomfortable I am with the fact that she walks around in just a towel after she showers, or how she'll sleep in the guest room with the door open, sometimes in her underwear. I mean, who does that? It feels incredibly inappropriate, especially when it's not just her and me in the house, but James is there too. I brought this up to her a while ago, and she basically brushed it off, saying we're all family and that I shouldn't care so much. But I do care. It's my house, and she's a guest. There should be some boundaries, right? I also talked to James about it, and while he listened and tried to understand where I was coming from, he basically told me it was between me and Fran. He said he wasn't going to tell her what she can and can't wear in our house. It just feels like everyone is dismissing my concerns, and I'm being made to feel like I'm the unreasonable one. It's not like I'm imagining things. I come home, and there's my sister, sitting next to my husband on the couch, talking about their high school memories while I'm left out of the conversation. I walk in on her lounging around in a towel or less, and I feel like I'm the one being weird for not being okay with it. I don't know how to get through to them that it bothers me. And then, after everything that happened this weekend, with the comment my mom made and the way Fran just smiled and nodded like it was no big deal, I finally had enough. I told my mom that I didn't appreciate her talking about James like that, and I didn't want her making jokes about my marriage. But instead of understanding where I was coming from, she doubled down. She kept saying that it was just hypothetical and that she only wants both her daughters to be happy, but it didn't feel like that to me. It felt like she was saying Fran would have been better off with James, and that I don't need him in the same way. Fran chimed in too, saying I shouldn't take it so personally and that I was being too sensitive. That was the last straw for me, and I ended up leaving. When I got home and told James about it, he sided with my mom and Fran. He said my mom didn't mean anything by it, and that it was just a harmless joke. I tried to explain how hurtful it was to me, how it brought up all these old feelings of being second best to my sister, but he didn't seem to get it. I also brought up how uncomfortable I am with Fran's behavior at our house, and he pretty much told me it's something I need to handle with her and that he's not going to get involved. So now, even though everyone has apologized, I just feel off. Like something is broken and I don't know how to fix it. I don't feel secure in my own marriage right now, and that's not a good feeling. I don't want to be the insecure wife who's jealous of her sister, but at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that something's not right here. I'm left wondering if I'm justified in feeling this way, or if I really am overreacting like they all say I am. Maybe I just need to let it go and trust that James loves me and that there's nothing more to it, but that's easier said than done. Update 2. So I've taken some time to reflect, and to be completely honest, things have been a whirlwind. I tried to stay quiet for a while and see if I could let it go, but that was easier said than done. This whole situation has been eating away at me, and after reading everyone's thoughts and taking some time to really think about what's been going on, I knew I couldn't just leave it hanging like this. I needed to address it, not just for myself, but for the sake of my marriage, my relationship with Fran, and my overall peace of mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the issue wasn't just about the comment my mom made. Sure, that comment was a trigger, but it brought out so many underlying feelings I've been pushing down for years. It wasn't just a casual joke to me. It was a culmination of years of feeling overshadowed, undervalued, and like I was always second to Fran. And honestly, I don't think I'm overreacting anymore. I'm allowed to feel hurt by what my mom said, and I'm allowed to have boundaries in my marriage. It's not about being insecure, it's about knowing what I'm okay with and what I'm not. And this whole situation just crossed too many lines for me. After that last conversation with James, I sat on my feelings for a while, trying to figure out if I could let it go or if I needed to address it again. I realized that pretending everything was fine wasn't going to work. Ignoring it wouldn't make the problem go away. It would just fester and build up more resentment, and that's not what I want for my marriage or for my relationship with my family. So, I decided to have one final big conversation with everyone. I started with James. I told him I needed him to really hear me this time, not just brush it off as me being too sensitive or emotional. I laid it all out there, how I've been feeling, how the dynamic between him and Fran makes me uncomfortable, how I feel like I'm the third wheel in my own home sometimes, and how hurt I was by my mom's comment. I told him that it wasn't about not trusting him, but about the boundaries that just weren't being respected. To my surprise, James finally got it. I don't know if it was because I was so serious or if he could see how much this was affecting me, but he really listened this time. He apologized for not taking my concerns seriously before, and he admitted that he hadn't really thought about how all of this might be making me feel. He told me that he loves me, and that he doesn't have any feelings for Fran beyond friendship, but he understood that their relationship might be crossing some lines I'm not comfortable with. He promised to be more mindful of that in the future, and that was honestly a huge relief. I wasn't asking him to stop being friends with Fran. I just needed him to acknowledge my feelings and respect the boundaries in our marriage. Then came the harder part, talking to Fran and my mom. I wasn't sure how this was going to go, but I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I invited them both over, and I was honest with them about everything. I told them how much my mom's comment had hurt me, how it felt like she was diminishing my relationship with James, and how it brought up all these old feelings of being compared to Fran my whole life. I also talked to Fran about her behavior, about how uncomfortable it makes me when she comes over all the time, especially when I'm not home, and how her walking around in towels and sleeping in her underwear just isn't okay with me. At first, my mom tried to defend herself, saying it was just a joke and that she didn't mean anything by it, but I didn't back down this time. I told her that it doesn't matter if she meant it as a joke. What matters is how it made me feel, and that it crossed a line. I think she could see how serious I was, because after a while, she stopped trying to justify it and actually apologized. She admitted that she hadn't thought about how her words might affect me and said she would be more careful in the future. Fran, on the other hand, was a little more defensive. She said she didn't mean to make me feel left out or uncomfortable, and that she just felt like she was leaning on James as a friend during a tough time. I get that she's been through a lot, and I do want to support her, but I told her that she needs to respect my boundaries too. She kind of brushed off the towel and underwear thing at first, but when I told her how much it was bothering me, I think she finally started to take it more seriously. She agreed to be more mindful of how she acts around the house, and while I could tell she didn't love the idea of having to change her behavior, she did agree. I also set some boundaries moving forward. Fran can still come over, of course, but I told her I'd appreciate it if she gave us a heads up before she drops by, especially if I'm not home. I don't want to feel like I'm walking into my house and being surprised by her presence. James also agreed to be more aware of when Fran's around and make sure I don't feel like I'm being excluded. It might seem like small things, but to me, they make a big difference. Honestly, I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. It's not like everything is magically perfect now, but at least I've been heard. At least my concerns have been acknowledged, and I feel like I'm not just being brushed off anymore. I still have some lingering feelings of insecurity, but I'm working on that, and having this conversation with everyone has really helped. I don't feel like I'm crazy or overreacting anymore. I feel like I've been validated, and that's all I really wanted. For anyone who's been following this and wondering how it's all going to end, well, I'm still figuring things out, but I feel a lot better now. I think the biggest lesson I've learned from all of this is that I need to trust my instincts and not let people make me feel like my feelings aren't valid. If something's bothering me, I have the right to speak up about it, even if everyone else thinks it's not a big deal. James and I are in a better place now. We've talked through a lot of things, and I feel like we're more connected than we were before. Fran and I are still working on our relationship, but I think we'll get there eventually. And as for my mom, well, I think she's starting to realize that her words have more weight than she thought. And that's progress too. Thanks to everyone who gave me advice and helped me see things a little more clearly. I'm glad I didn't just let this go. Sometimes you have to speak up for yourself, even when it's hard.